Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Power of Fight. I am honored here today to welcome Clare Cory, that we'll have a nice interview with. Clare is a resilient breast cancer survivor who has faced multiple challenges throughout her journey. So I was fortunate enough to read Clare's blog over the weekend, in which I will share that blog in the link to it in the description below. But in it, Clare candidly discusses her cancer journey and sheds light on the physical and emotional toll of inflammatory breast cancer, and all the complexities of managing its consequences from all angles: diagnosis, treatment, emotional struggles, and the impact of side effects such as lymphedema. Today, we have the opportunity to delve deeper into Clare's experiences and gain insight from her remarkable resilience and determination to fight this disease. So like I said, Clare, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Danny. I appreciate that. It's great
My,
to be here with you.
my pleasure. Thank you. So Clare, I want to just kick things off by starting at the beginning of your story. Now, you discussed in your blog about an accidental hit to your chest, which you then attributed to some of the symptoms you were experiencing that time. And you also thought that hormones could be a possibility from these symptoms. Can you kind of walk us through this time and discuss your initial reactions, and about when you first experienced these symptoms?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, I had just turned 52 years old, and this was in the spring of 2017. And a couple things happened. One is that I sort of had a sensation of heaviness in one of my breasts, which at the time I attributed to hormonal changes. I was menopause age. Now what I know is that if you have a change in one breast and not in the other, that's a cause for concern. But it didn't occur to me at the time. And I had some itching with the breast, but nothing particularly unusual. And it didn't strike me as anything to be concerned about. And I'm somebody who's really takes care of my health, so I wasn't worried. But we happened to be one day in a crowded restaurant, and we were kind of scrunched up against the wall, and my brother-in-law accidentally hit me in the chest, and it hurt really bad. And I actually saw stars. It hurt so bad. And about a week after that, I noticed that breast had been kind of red and swollen and hot, almost like it had a fever. And I put I did the thing that you're not supposed to do, which is Dr. Google. So
Exactly.
I
We
yeah,
all
so
guilty.
I put the symptoms into Google, and it came back with inflammatory breast cancer. But I also saw, well, it's very rare. So I thought, oh, what's the chances of that? So I
Yeah.
wasn't at all concerned. But I'm very cognizant of my health. So I called the doctor immediately. She got me in that day. She was very much on top of it. She sent me for a mammogram and ultrasound that day. And they came back with no evidence of malignancy, and they gave me the all clear. And what I know now is that with inflammatory breast cancer, it is an unusual type of breast cancer, but it's usually not found with a mammogram and an ultrasound. And generally, you need an MRI or a core biopsy, something like that. So, the recommendation came back to do routine follow-up in 6 months, and off I went.
Yeah.
And wasn't worried at all. But she called me back and she said, I want you to come in because I want to take another look. And we had an audit going on at work. And like I said, I wasn't concerned. So I said, well, as soon as we get done with this audit, then I'll come in. So a couple of weeks went by, and I went out there, and I thought I would just be in and out. And she said, she noticed skin thickening, which I now know is a calling card of inflammatory breast cancer. And she told me I needed an MRI.
Yeah. Will you just explain what skin thickening is for other people? Because I know that is a
Yeah.
symptom of was it IBC? Yeah.
IBC, yes, inflammatory breast cancer, IBC. Again, a very rare, but also very aggressive form of breast cancer. And so skin thickening is really hard for sort of like the general public to assess for themselves. But she had a machine in her office, and she was able to see that there was skin thickening in that breast. And what's actually happening is the cancer is infiltrating the skin of the breast, and that's why it's becoming thicker. But it's not something that you can usually tell on your own. But what you do need to look out for are what they call the orange peel symptoms, the dimpling on the breast that is indicative of the cancer in the skin of the breast. And so I did have some orange peel symptoms. I did have some nipple retraction, which again are signs of concern. So she had me come back, and she had a lot of trouble getting a stat MRI approved by the insurance company, but she managed to get them to come around to her way of thinking.
I know
And as
that
soon as
battle all too well.
don't you? Yeah, it was rough. So 3 weeks after I had been told that I had no, evidence of disease, no sign of malignancy, I was diagnosed with stage 3B inflammatory breast cancer. And so that's how, the whole journey got started. And a couple weeks after that, I was hooked up to a chemo pole and on my way.
Man, yeah. So from my understanding, so mammograms, they don't detect this then because you write in your blog that you had mammograms, everything came out fine. So it was just
Yes.
really your own research and then your doctor insistence say, hey, let's look into this further. Is that correct then?
That is correct. So I want to say that I'm sure that there are cases where mammograms correctly identify inflammatory breast cancer, but it is a unique presentation often in that there's no lump. So IBC, there's kind of an expression that goes with it, no lump, still cancer. I should have worn my shirt that says that.
Yeah.
And so we're used to thinking about breast cancer in terms of lumps, but with inflammatory breast cancer, the cancer tends to present almost like cotton candy, like shards of glass. And so it does not pop up on those routine screening devices very well. That's why an MRI is recommended. Yeah.
Okay. So now, okay, so everything is kind of coming at you pretty fast. And I mean, you get that, you
Mhm.
have that 6 months, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're stuck with cancer and you're going to get chemo. What was your, I mean, what was your like your emotional state? What was your initial reactions and feelings when, hearing this? Because I know for me, it was
Yeah.
devastating. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say I've been diagnosed with cancer twice. The hardest experience was the first time. And it's wow, how do you say, it's just scary as all get out. I was very healthy, so I kept thinking to myself, how can this happen to a healthy person? Well, cancer doesn't discriminate, but
That's
my
not at
thought was,
all.
this is not possible. I was not sleeping well at all. I really, I started sleeping on my couch. Was waking up in the middle of the night. I was thinking that the cancer was spreading, by the second, um, I was having a hard time focusing and concentrating. And, it's very destabilizing. And all of a sudden, as you well know, your world changes very fast.
Oh, yes.
And it's, especially with these aggressive types of cancer, there's no time to waste. And so they wanted me on chemo ASAP, and I had to get a port put in. I didn't even know what a chemo port was. And somebody called and said, we're scheduling you for a port surgery. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. Didn't know what it was. But, and then they needed a couple days for the port to settle down and start the chemo. But there's a real rush to get the treatment going, especially with cancer like inflammatory, because it does spread very quickly. There's no stage 1 or 2 for inflammatory breast cancer. The earliest possible diagnosis is stage 3B, and I was really fortunate to be diagnosed at 3B.
So now it sounds like during this time you had a really good relationship with your doctor, but was there a point where you're like, well, no, I want a second opinion, or I don't know if I want to go chemo, like, because for me, I saw my father basically wither away from chemo and radiation, which I had a lot of pause for. What about you? Were you like, because once you go down these treatments, things get pretty hot and heavy.
Yeah, so I never questioned at all the value of chemo. However, what did happen was a pretty challenging situation because I have a cousin who I sure didn't know very well at that time. Now I've gotten to know a lot better, who happens to be an oncologist. And his mom said, hey, why don't you send him your reports and let him take a look? And I was kind of embarrassed,
Yeah.
hey, you want to read my breast cancer report.
Yeah.
But he said, if there's any question that this is inflammatory, then he said that he recommended that I have an evaluation at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, because they have the oldest and still the largest specialty clinic for treating inflammatory breast cancer in the United States. And I didn't understand the necessity of us, getting that sort of specialized care for an unusual cancer, because many oncologists will only see one or two cases of inflammatory in a career. And it does make a difference how often you treat a particular type of cancer. And there are some unique treatment aspects with inflammatory. And so he recommended I fly down to Houston, which I did in between getting the port installed and waiting to start chemo. And so I don't know that it sort of counted as a second opinion, but it was an opinion. And they concluded that, yes, indeed, this was inflammatory, and wanted me to start chemo ASAP. But they also persuaded me that they wanted to do the surgery and the radiation because of their expertise in treating inflammatory breast cancer. And I'm very glad that I did it that way.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I want to just touch base on the MD Anderson thing. So personally, one of my sisters had breast cancer as well. She was living in Houston at the time, and she went to MD Anderson, and she got some great doctors there. So did you was that from your doctor's choice, like, hey, MD Anderson's the top, or was that your own research that you found that?
It was, frankly, it was my cousin who recommended it.
His cousin, okay.
Yeah. And so I, at that point, was too overwhelmed to figure that out myself.
Yeah.
And even, some of my family members and some of my close friends said, well, why do you need to go all the way to Houston? Can't you just do your treatment in Phoenix? But my cousin was very persuasive and said, you really need, if again, because this is likely inflammatory, you need to be seen by a specialty clinic. Now I completely understand the wisdom and the value of that, but at the time I did not. And mostly my sister made a flight arrangement and I got on the plane. That's pretty much how it went.
That's good. So she took command. There you go.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
that So did you I mean, how was your family's response at this time? I know your cousin kind of stepped up and your sister. Was there anyone who's like, well, don't be so aggressive, or, back up, or were they like, well, uh, are you doing your due diligence? Because I know, when I first announced it, I got from different people all this different feedback. They told me try the natural route completely and try this. What was your support system like from your family wise?
Well, my family has been terrific. And so I can say that I haven't had anybody who hasn't been supportive of, my choice to go at treatment full speed ahead, and certainly there are people who have differing opinions about treatment, but nobody ever, wanted to sort of argue with me about it. And I'm very, very grateful that, yeah, my family was very supportive. In particular, I'm from a big family. I'm the oldest of seven children,
Oh,
and
very nice. I'm the second
um,
of six. I mean, the fifth of
okay.
six. So
Oh, the fifth,
big
yeah. So
families, yeah.
yeah. And, a couple of my sisters in particular, were literally making the plane reservations and putting, getting those things in order that uh, basically compelled me to show up in Houston for this evaluation, because once they went to all that trouble, I wasn't going to not get on the plane. So, yeah.
So you went to Houston. Now, in regards to your personal and professional life at this time, so I know when everything for me it stopped. I had to leave work. My personal life, everything that was kind of put on side as well. Everything moved into cancer. What was yours like? What changes happened in your personal life and your professional life, either positive or negative?
Well, I will say this, that it quickly became apparent to me how important it was for me to continue working. And that was for my own sanity stability and well-being. I very quickly realized that it was much better for my mental health and my mental stability to be engaged with my work. Now, I was lucky because, of course, not everybody can do that. I was able to because I didn't have a really tough time with chemo. I'm not going to say it was easy,
Yeah, no,
but
no worries.
and also they timed it when I was on the Red Devil chemo, the notorious Red Devil, adriamycin and Cytoxan. They timed it so that I had infusion, and they do this for a lot of folks who are working. I had infusion on Wednesdays, and then on Friday afternoon is when the big side effects would set in. And so I would just leave work a little early on Friday. I'd be down for the count pretty much Friday night, all day Saturday, and I'd start coming back up
Yeah,
on Sunday, and I'd be ready to go to work on Monday morning. And that's how that went. And so I have side effects. I still currently, I have neuropathy in my feet, you know, from chemo and other long-lasting side effects, but I never got really sick, and I was perfectly fine with continuing to go to work during that period of time. And I'm very, very grateful that I was able to, like I said, because I know a lot of people have a lot more trouble with it than I did, but
oh,
it
absolutely.
worked out okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because for me, the first time, because you're a two-time cancer survivor, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I know for me, the first time, I had to continue working, so I worked through it. I remember going to radiation during my lunch hour, and then vomiting before and heading back to work. Were you like actively when you were working? So you were actively doing radiation as well? Because I know you did trimodal treatment, and so for people,
Hmm.
radiation, chemotherapy, and then uh, what's the other one?
Surgery.
Surgery. Yeah,
Surgery.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, what was
Yes. So the way that the protocol for inflammatory breast cancer is neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And so the first time I was diagnosed, I did 16 rounds of chemo, and then they give you a couple weeks before you go into surgery so that your white blood cell count comes back up, you know, a little bit.
yep,
And so then I went to surgery and I had a radical mastectomy. And I got to tell you, the surgery was very easy. It was no big deal at all. They did take a lot of lymph nodes, and that has left me with significant problems with lymphedema. But I recovered from the surgery very quickly. Happened to have surgery a couple days before Christmas, so wasn't a big deal to be off of work during the holiday season. And then, however, I went to Houston for radiation for about 5 to 6 weeks, and that was hard. I was away from work, and that was before COVID. So we were not doing as many of the virtual meetings that
yeah,
we are now in the COVID world, or in the COVID or post-COVID world.
yeah.
And so I had radiation once a day. I had 33 rounds of radiation, and I did that down in Houston. And I found for myself it was manageable. I'd done a consult with integrative medicine at MD Anderson prior to starting radiation, and they were fantastic, told me a whole bunch of stuff that I never would have known otherwise about, you know, making sure I had enough protein and things like that. And so I didn't have a too hard of a time with it.
So one thing I want to touch base on is because what you just said that so you had chemo before surgery. Uh,
Yes.
so that's interesting. Like, why? How did that come about? Because I know, I mean, from my experience, it was always the surgery first. Attack, get the tumor out, get whatever cancer is, try to clean up the area, and then I had the radiation and the chemo, and of course this time after my surgery, they placed radiation tablets in my brain, so it was like immediately after. But so what like is that a typical treatment for IBS like that or IBC? I'm sorry. IBC,
Yes,
where
it is.
yeah. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
And in fact, it's not uncommon for a number of breast cancers, but I can't speak to those because I know IBC the best, of
Yeah,
course. And so my understanding again, and I'm a lay person, obviously, but
I'm
is
just
that the
speaking to one.
cancer
Don't worry.
is it's so widespread. So that MRI that I had showed a 13 centimeter tumor. So it's a very large tumor. And my understanding with inflammatory breast cancer is that it's again, we're talking about something that's similar to cotton candy or shards of glass in the breast area, that if you go to surgery before the chemo has had a chance to come in and shrink that tumor, if you go to surgery too soon, you can cause the cancer to spread and potentially end your life very quickly. Unfortunately, some women who have not had specialty care and who haven't had the standard of care for inflammatory breast cancer have been subjected to surgeries like that, and unfortunately and tragically have lost their lives. And so the standard is very clearly to do chemo. You want to shrink the tumor down as much as possible. This is for stage 3, folks.
Yeah.
For stage 4, oftentimes they don't do the surgery, but for stage 3, you want to shrink the tumor down as much as possible before you go to surgery.
Now, can you, since we're talking about staging a little bit, can you kind of just describe what staging is for the listeners?
Yeah, so, well, I think probably everybody's familiar with sort of the basics of
Yeah.
cancer staging. I know with breast cancer, you can have a stage 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then within each of those, it's broken down into sub stages. Like I mentioned with inflammatory breast cancer, because it's so aggressive, it grows so quickly that you don't find it until it's already at a stage 3 presentation. So for instance, I had had a mammogram in January of 2017 and everything was fine. I had another mammogram in early May of 2017. Everything's fine. And on May 23rd, I'm diagnosed with a stage 3 cancer. So it grows very quickly. And so within the stage 3 staging process, they look at 3B or 3C. And because the cancer was, which is standard for inflammatory, was in my lymph nodes, but not in the more distant lymph nodes in my neck.
Okay.
But just in the local lymph nodes, that's what staged me at a 3B.
Okay, excellent. Now, so I want to return back to surgery in a little, but I want to just ask you something that you said to me earlier. So initially, when you started, you wanted to keep your cancer diagnosis like private. Is that correct?
Um, no, I told I was very transparent with people, but what I didn't say was that it was inflammatory.
Oh,
Everybody knew that I had breast cancer, but I was pretty freaked out by the fact that I had inflammatory breast cancer. And it took me well over a year before I could tell people outside of my very immediate family that I'd had a 13-centimeter tumor. And so it's kind of funny that I say that so casually to you today, because that was more than a year. Also, people would ask me what stage it was, and I didn't want to answer.
yeah,
So I was totally fine with telling people I had breast cancer, but my fear was that once I acknowledged that it was inflammatory, that people would Google it and would go, "Oh no,
yeah,
she's on her way out of this life," and I just didn't want that. And so I did not tell most people outside of my immediate circle that I was diagnosed with inflammatory until after I finished my trimodal treatment, which was chemo, surgery, and radiation.
okay.
And then at that point, I kind of, quote, went public with having inflammatory breast cancer.
Yeah, I know. So similar thing with mine. So like when my dad got ill, he didn't want to tell anyone, and it was something we were like, why don't you tell people? They might know, tricks or they might know treatments. And for me is when I first went through, I announced it like on social media, and I got a flooding of support, of course, and I got all these, different nutrition advice. Some of them were great, some of them were not so well. But yeah, no, the second time, I kind of kept it a little under wraps just because it's tough when you first announce it. Like you said, people, they go look at it and they say, okay, well, are they still going to last? And then when you do that second time, it's like, oh man, this person might be down for the count, and that was stuff I really didn't want to hear or have people think about, But were you when you did get diagnosed the second time, what was that like in your mind? Like, how did you deal with that?
It was shocking because I'm I'm one of a very small number of people who've had two primary diagnoses of inflammatory breast cancer. Apparently, fewer than 5 are known cases. So it was completely stunning. It never, ever happens. And even my doctors couldn't believe it either. And so when I saw things starting to change, I went in, of course, right away. And they pretty much nobody believed it was possible. And they actually said to me, well, we're going to leave this up to you. What do you want to do? And they said, we can do a punch biopsy today. And I told them no, because that punch biopsy missed this last time. And I want the ultrasound guided core biopsy, but that meant that I had to wait longer. But what's the point of doing a biopsy where you may not be able to accurately identify the cancer? And so it took about a week for me to get in. And the radiologist came in, and I'll never forget it. And he stood there and he crossed his arms and he said, your results are absolutely, and I waited for him to say the word normal.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
instead he said, your results are absolutely abnormal. And that's, I knew at that moment I was here, the whole thing was going to start again. So I was within 2 weeks, I was back on chemo, and I did 20 rounds of chemo that time before I went to surgery. And the first time I had an excellent outcome. I had the PCR, the pathologic complete result to chemo. The chemo eradicated the cancer completely. Of course, we still did surgery and radiation. The second time I did not get that good of a result. I still had quite a bit of residual cancer in the lymph nodes. And so I did, after surgery, 44 rounds of radiation to try to knock that out. Yeah.
What was the time period, from your first diagnosis to your second? Like, how long did this span?
My first diagnosis was in May of 2017, and my second diagnosis was in February of 2021.
Okay.
So it was about not quite 4 years later now.
Wow.
And yeah, the symptoms had started up in early January, and I
Basically,
I
like,
finally got the diagnosis early February. Yeah.
yeah. So it was basically like just repeating again the
Yes.
process. Oh, that must have been
Yeah,
terrible.
all over again. Yeah. And nobody could believe it. Like the entire oncology team, because it's so unheard of that you would have two separate primaries. I believe that MD Anderson in Houston had my case in front of the tumor board. I was told that there was quite a vigorous debate about it, but it was eventually concluded that it was a second primary and not a reoccurrence, which is, again, very unusual.
Wow. Man.
I'm
Now, one thing I want
an
to talk.
overachiever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, same here. I had brain cancer in 2015, and then they gave me like 2 to 4 years to live, and then I was 7 years cancer free. And once I hit that 5 year mark, you kind of ease up on things because you think,
Mhm.
you're cancer free. And then of course, 2022 came around, and boy, cancer just kicked my butt. Stage 4, it moved up to, and then I had that stroke after surgery, which was just mind blowing. And completely threw a whole bunch of other, problems into the mix. But, one thing I want to talk about with you, and I don't know if this is your term, you came up with it, but scanxiety, because I love that. Did you come up with that?
Oh, no, no, it's a common term, certainly in the breast cancer community. And but yeah, it does fit because all of us who go through scans have the scanxiety, I think.
Oh,
And
yes.
so either when you're preparing to go into a machine, because for some people that's very anxiety producing, but particularly for me, is when you're waiting for the results, and you want to find out what they say.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, let me ask you this: with your scans, oops, were you was it always like a waiting period of doom for you, or were you like kind of, maybe this one will be the positive one, maybe this one is gonna come out clear?
Well, it's interesting, and I did write a piece on my blog about anxiety because it's a little bit, I don't know how I would say, I don't know if I would call it a double-edged sword, but there's a part of the waiting that's really hard, right? Because you don't know if you're going to get good results or not. But the flip side of that is that as long as you haven't gotten bad news,
Yeah.
then it's pretty darn good day. And so sometimes I've had the thought, well, um, between now and the time I get the results, those are all going to be really good days because to my full knowledge, there's nothing more that's gone wrong, you know. And then once you get the results, it could be that something has gone wrong, or it could be that, you know, hey, carry on, everything's going great. So it's a mixed bag, I would say. And some of that has been really changed for those of us who are patients because of the 21st Century Cures Act, and I think the advocacy of a lot of cancer patients. But what it amounts to is that your reports are uploaded now into an app in your medical chart in pretty much whatever hospital you're going to, and you can access those reports in some cases before your oncology team ever sees them.
So Claire, now you did mention something that I do myself as well. You're talking about these online portals, and nowadays, they upload your tests in there, and you can view them yourself before you talk to the doctor. Now, you mentioned in your blog what a mistake that is, and I agree as well. Can you just go into that a little bit? Because I know from a personal standpoint, but let's let the audience know what it's like to trying to read your own stuff and that whole thing.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, you know, we're lay people. I'm a lay person. I'm certainly not trained in medical language. And so reports get uploaded that you can read them, and they may say things that are scary. And I don't have the context for what all of that means, you know. And
Absolutely.
so I don't think it's a good idea to read them most of the time, although I've definitely done it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, until you get a chance to talk to the physician about it, because that can set off its own chain of anxiety that maybe is completely unnecessary because I don't have the context to understand a word maybe that I interpreted as something negative, but it's actually something positive, right? You know, like for instance, the PCR with chemo is a PCR stands for pathologic complete result. Well, I hear the word pathologic and I go, oh no, that's not good. But
Yeah.
actually, a PCR is a very good thing. So it's things like that, that because, you know, I don't have context for the medical terminology, that it's probably not a good idea to read them until
No,
you meet with them.
you're so right. I'm guilty of it constantly. I mean, I remember when I used to get my radiation scans, I would just sit there trying to play with it, like, is that the size of my tumor? Is that the size of my tumor? But now it's funny because I still kind of do it, and I hail my doctor over it. He must be annoyed with me every time because I have to get blood tests every week, and every time my ALT or whatever, these like little things I have no clue what they are high, and then I Google them. I quickly write him. Do I have to worry about this? Am I at liver failure? So yeah, it is best to definitely talk to your doctor. I mean, if you want to review it, look at it, but don't make any conclusions, I would say.
That's correct. Yeah, to be very careful about drawing conclusions. Yeah. Hmm.
So now I want to talk to you about the struggle that is the treatment, because I know that struggle and of the chemotherapy. And there's one thing you said that which I love is that, and you really described, well, you talk about the taste and the loss of appetite. And that's huge. And you would describe it as everything kind of tasting like sand. And that is so true. Just in your own words, can you just describe that, what that for me, please?
Yeah, I did a blog post called Two Summers of Eating Sand because it just so happened that I was on chemo in the summer of 2017 and the summer of 2021. And it really dulls down your taste buds, like almost like your tongue gets sanded down, you know, to the most basic level. And it's yeah, food does not taste the same,
And what this meant.
A friend of mine who had been through chemo some years ago, before I started treatment the first time, she said to me, don't eat any of your favorite foods while you're on chemo because you won't like them anymore.
Yeah.
And what I should have done was eaten all the donuts that I wanted to, because now I
Yeah.
would never ever want to eat another donut. And somebody got me a pink drink from Starbucks one day, and if I even see that drink now, I immediately feel nauseous. It wasn't the drink, it was that it was associated with the chemo. I ate potato chips one day, and I've hardly been able to eat potato chips since, because they immediately make me nauseous. Although I wasn't really that nauseous on chemo, but it registers somewhere in the brain. But yes, it's hard to keep your appetite going. And ultimately, what I was told, there's certainly a lot of focus on eating healthy, which is a good thing. But I was also told by the oncology team, the most important thing is that you just keep eating.
Yeah.
And so if it needs to be something that isn't, the best possible food, well, then that's okay. If it's not the best nutritional value, but certainly I tried to eat very healthy. And then after the second chemo, or my second cancer treatment, some friends of mine had come to visit, and we had gone out at one of those fancy places for tea and scones. And that day, I'll never forget it. It was probably one of the most memorable meals of my life. And I remember eating one of those cute little sandwiches, those precious little sandwiches on the tray. And I went, oh my God, I can taste it. And I had not really been able to taste flavor for, I don't know, 6, 7 months by that point. And so it was just a beautiful thing. It was like the world coming back into color, from being
Yeah.
in black, white, and gray. And the other thing, certainly with the Red Devil chemo, is that it gave everything a metallic taste, like so you'd feel like you were eating a fork, and
Kind of
so
like
it
when
is
the
it is
contrast
tough.
goes through your arm for an MRI. When it first goes through, you taste the metal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's,
And so, it's quite an amazing thing, because I look at chemo this way. It completely, no doubt, saved my life.
yeah.
But in the process of saving your life, it kind of takes you down to the studs, because so much of what is elemental to survival, chemo takes away, like your appetite and your taste buds, and so much of that.
Oh, yeah.
So it takes a lot, but it has the potential to give too. So
No, no, absolutely. Now, for me, like during this time going through chemo, what they did with my nutrition, you answered my next question for me with that. My nutrition, they really, like tweaked. I remember the first time I kind of devised my own nutrition, and the second time they were like, you got to be on keto, and keto was tough and it was rough. No more sugar. I can't eat sugar for the rest of my life. But you talking
mhm.
about certain foods that you have to stay away from. I got so sick of bacon for a little while. I was like, I can never have it again. So,
Yeah.
my Jewish parents, God rest their soul, they're like, well, finally he got what's coming to him. Actually, I shouldn't say that's terrible, but yeah. But yeah, so I wasn't able to do that anymore. But now that story, I just love. You're sitting there eating tea, and like just the world, the color comes back to you,
Mhm,
which
mhm,
is awesome.
mhm.
Now,
Yeah, it was beautiful.
yeah, that's the thing is like, there's not because you have downfalls and everything, but then once you're starting to come out, you experience life in such a new and rich way. And I want to talk
Mhm.
to you about that. But first, I want to talk to you about because I know my sisters went through reconstruction, breast reconstruction, both of them, and it was very tough. I want to talk to you about that, your experience with the breast reconstruction, how that affected you. Because I know in one of your blogs you said you still categorize yourself as a woman. That is the most important thing. And I know my sisters were the same thing, and they both had the breast reconstruction, but it was very tough on them mentally and very tough on them physically. What was your experience like through that?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And reconstruction is such an important topic, in the breast cancer world. So all I can speak to again is inflammatory. And for inflammatory breast cancer, you cannot do immediate reconstruction. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You cannot do implant-based reconstruction because in order to save our lives, all the skin needs to be removed from the breast. And in order to do an implant-based reconstruction, you need some skin to remain to seal the implant into. And so generally with inflammatory, they won't do reconstruction, but again, part of it has to do with the intensity of radiation. We do a lot of radiation for this type of cancer, and you get very burned. And so generally it's 18 months to 2 years. I had no interest in doing reconstruction, but what happened was that I was diagnosed with a very advanced stage of lymphedema in the MD Anderson staging system. I was at a stage 5. And so the doctor there proposed a lymph node transplant along with what's called a deep flap reconstruction, where they take skin from your abdomen and belly fat, which, believe me, I was pretty happy about that, and create a new breast. What I've learned about that is that the flaps, there's no substitute for a very skilled surgeon for a flap-based reconstruction. Unfortunately, many of them fail. I had no idea about this, and now I do know people who've had failed reconstruction and have had to live with very debilitating consequences of failed reconstruction. So it's not a given that it's going to work. I had a very skilled surgeon. He did a great job. And so I did have a lot of success with that. And then a year later, I was diagnosed with a second cancer. And so I am not reconstructed on that side. I'm not far enough out yet for it to be considered. And it may be something we'll talk about down the road in a year or two, but we're not there yet.
Well, I must say, just from talking to you, and we work together with the American Cancer Society, and I always follow you on Facebook, and your fight has been really, one that has inspired me as well. And if I can ask you this, so one thing I've always heard is after you have cancer, your priorities change, which is true to a certain extent. And for me, it was like that. But certain things, still annoy me. Like I always say, you still get that middle seat in the airplane, you're still stuck behind that person checking out way too long. So it's not like things just roll off your back. But what insights, have you taken away, or, now future joys or something of appreciations from this whole cancer journey you've been on?
Well, it's a great question, because I think sometimes for those of us who are cancer survivors, there's almost a pressure to enjoy every minute of every day. And that's a lot to expect from anybody.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I am very grateful to be alive, but it is a lot of pressure to have to feel like you're living your best life every single minute. And I don't think that that's fair to offload that onto cancer survivors. But I was always a person who felt grateful for life, but certainly every day that I'm healthy, I do feel grateful for my health. I cannot say that my priorities have changed all that much, because what's important to me is that I get to go to work, that I get to spend time with my family, that I'm frankly very blessedly not living in pain. And I know so many folks do. I'm living in discomfort from lymphedema, but it's not pain. It's a tolerable discomfort.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about, the lymphedema, because that is something that you still deal with regularly.
Oh, every day. There is no, so for me, it's somewhat the price that we pay for staying alive, because most women with inflammatory breast cancer will end up with lymphedema. Because for one reason, it has to do with the number of lymph nodes that are removed. And my first surgery was 25, and my second was 38 lymph nodes were removed. And so lymphedema is constant management every day, every night. I'm on various pumps. I'm in compression all the time. Every day is a challenge, but it's not, I can't say that it's painful. It's uncomfortable, and it's frankly expensive because most of the compression garments aren't covered by insurance.
Yeah.
It's very time consuming. Oh my goodness. I've been in a lot of PT. I'm getting calls all the time about various compression garments and getting fitted and measured, and goodness sakes, it's like similar to, getting fitted for a wedding dress, but
Yeah.
similar cost, except you're doing it several times a year. So lymphedema is a challenge, but again, it's the price you pay to still be here living this life, and I'm grateful for that.
That's excellent, excellent. Now,
Mhm.
I wanted to bring up one thing before we close off, and I wanted to ask you about this because I've dealt with this also, is the insurance route, is having that for me, they put me on a chemotherapy of glycine, and my insurance would not approve it, and it cost $2,000 a pill, and I had to call them and basically plead with them, and they agreed to pay for my medication and give it to me, not my insurance, actual factory. Can you just kind of touch insight about the difficulty sometimes insurance can be to navigate? Like you have an exam
Mhm.
and they won't approve it. I mean, just please talk a little about that from your own experience.
Yeah, it is not easy. Now, I'm someone with employer-based insurance, and my employer has been outstandingly supportive of me, and my insurance has generally been really good. We did change insurance companies. My employer changed companies last year, which was, I got to tell you, when I heard about it, I about dropped through the floor. I was scared out of my mind. I was like, what? And because you really rely on that health insurance. So this is what I want to say. My experience has been better than many, many people's. That doesn't mean that it's been easy. Yes, there are times when we've had to fight to get a scan approved. Um, there have been, so for instance, that what I call the big surgery, the night before my lymph node transplant and deep flap, which is a 12-hour surgery, 12 hours. I was in Houston in an Airbnb. I had all my paperwork filled out to take time off of work. It's now 8 o'clock, and I am to report to surgery at 5 in the morning. And I got a call from the insurance company saying it was not approved, or was it from the hospital itself? I can't remember, saying your surgery is not approved for tomorrow morning. And I about, it's like your heart jumps out of your chest. I think it was the hospital calling me, and they told me to call the insurance company. And Houston was a couple hours ahead of Arizona. And so I was able to get somebody on the phone. I was able to get somebody, frankly, in my human resources department for my employer. And we did get it straightened out, and I was approved, but that was very scary. And there was another situation that came up with a particular type of proton radiation that was recommended. And proton radiation is not in standard use for breast cancer at this time. And so it was denied by the insurance company, and I would have had to self-pay $150,000 for that. And ultimately, the decision was made to do, quote, regular radiation. And that worked very well. I've had no, recurrence on that side. But it's things like that that sometimes you have to measure out, what's doable, what's not. And certainly lymphedema, my compression garments are the most expensive clothing, if you want to call it that I've ever owned in my life.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they're not the ones that I like to wear, but because they have to be specially fitted. And right now here in Phoenix, it's quite hot out. And so my arm has gotten bigger. So a sleeve that I was just fitted for in April, I can no longer wear. And
Wow.
that sleeve, cost me $500 out of pocket. And now I can't even wear it. And so it's things like that. And the Lymphedema Treatment Act was passed in December of 2022. We are hoping there will be more coverage for lymphedema garments beginning in 2024, but we're not quite there yet.
Excellent. Yeah, people don't understand that so much stress, just not even just the illness, just the things of trying to navigate it, and like with these insurance
Yes.
companies, it just adds on to it. So, but man, you are the definition of a fighter. So that's why I
Thank
love
you.
having you on this, and it was awesome. And just before we depart, I want to just, is there any advice you have for other people out there who may be facing a similar situation? Anything you want to impart on them? I
Well,
mean,
one of the things that help, what what helped me the most when I got scared, and there have been a lot of times when I've been really scared, was I'd always think to myself, well, there's a whole lot of other people who've already been through this. And if they did it, so can I. And so nobody wants to be part of the cancer club. I know you and I didn't,
no.
nobody does. But should it happen to anybody out there, any listener to this interview or anybody else, just remember there's a whole lot of people who've been through it. And if we've done it, you can do it. And I've now met many of those people, and they are a guide and an inspiration to me when I'm facing something difficult, that I know that they've done it and I can do it too.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Claire. It was a pleasure. So I want to, give your blog a shout out because it was fabulous. The blog
Thank
for
you.
everyone, it's called Moments of Clarity. I'm going to, the link will be in the description. And Claire, is there anything else you want to, promote or talk about before we sign off?
It would be great if anybody wants to read my blog. It is Moments of Clarity, spelled CACLAREITY. And my mom said to me, "You spelled clarity wrong." And I'm like, "Mom,
Oh, moms.
it's my name,
Yeah,
the one you gave me." And
yeah.
so what I try to do is be as transparent as possible about cancer and treatment, and talk frankly about things that I did find incredibly hard to talk about, most especially in the first year.
Well, you did a brilliant job here. I'm energized from it. I mean, like I said,
Mhm.
this is the true power of fight, and you are a fighter. So, thank you so much, Claire. It was an
Thank you,
honor
Danny.
today, and good luck in the future. And I'm sure we'll be in touch. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Danny, and best to
Thank
you.
you so much. Bye bye.
Hello there. My name is Bruce Marin from Bruce Marin Celebrity Speakers and Entertainment in Las Vegas, the entertainment capital of the world. I am blessed beyond words. I have had my Celebrity Speakers Bureau for 50 years. We're celebrating our 50-year anniversary. And when we started 50 years ago, my first two entertainment clients were Michael Landon and Johnny Carson. And my first two sports clients were Muhammad Ali and Jackie Robinson. And I'm here now to talk to you about the incredible, the phenomenal, the amazing Danny Efron. And the reason I'm talking to you is I've been blessed to see the best speakers in the world. For 5 decades, I've seen all the best speakers in the world. And Danny will inspire and motivate you, just like some of the greatest speakers in that field that I've ever booked. Legendary Les Brown, I booked him many, many times. Dr. Wayne Dyer, I have booked him over 50 times. Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, I booked him over 50 times. And Bob Proctor, the legend Bob Proctor. And the reason I'm mentioning these legendary motivational and inspirational speakers is that Danny Efron is in their league. He's an inspirational and motivational speaker. And the reason I'm talking to you right now is I hope that when I'm done, you'll consider booking Danny Efron. And I want right now to I have a very successful, exciting story to share with you. I had the pleasure right here in Las Vegas of booking Danny Efron to the most prestigious business group right here in Las Vegas. And it was at Lowry's restaurant in Las Vegas. Danny gave a 45-minute talk. And at the end, when he was all done, he got a thunderous standing ovation for over 2 minutes. It touched my heart to see how Danny had impacted that audience. And after that amazing standing ovation, Danny stayed by for over an hour, meeting all the hundreds of people that were at that event. And to make it even a better story, Danny was such a successful speaker that day that everybody in this big business group in Vegas said, we want to bring Danny Efron back again. So yes, we booked Danny Efron a second time here in Las Vegas. And do you know what happened? Even a longer standing ovation at the second event. So what I'm going to tell all of you right now, take some time and book Danny Efron, whether it's a keynote speaker or to come and do a meet and greet, to do a workshop, to do a breakout session, to be a trainer. I'm just letting you know, with 50 years of experience in my field, when it comes to inspiring and motivating audiences, Danny Efron is as good as I've ever seen in my life. So I can help make you smile if you'll take the time, contact us, and let's book Danny for a keynote presentation. He is the best in the world, and I say that from my heart. And I thank all of you for listening to my words, and let's book Danny Efron. Thank you.